Frozen and alone, a German Shepherd puppy's plea for rescue. A tiny German Shepherd puppy shivering in the snow paws desperately at a cafe's glass door. Will anyone stop to help, or will it be left to freeze alone? A small German Shepherd puppy wandered aimlessly through the bitter cold, its tiny paws sinking into the deep, unforgiving snow. The icy wind howled through the empty streets, each gust sending a shiver through its frail, malnourished body. It had no mother, no shelter, no warmth, just the endless stretch of white surrounding it. Its fur, once a soft mix of black and tan, was now matted with frost, clinging to its fragile frame. The pup's ribs pressed against its thin skin, a silent testament to the hunger gnawing at its belly. Whimpering softly, it limped forward, each step a desperate plea for help. Where had it come from? Why was it alone? The answers lay buried in the past. But right now, survival was the only thing that mattered. The street was eerily silent, blanketed in a thick layer of snow. The streetlights flickered, their glow barely piercing the swirling blizzard. Everything was frozen in time, an endless winter night with no mercy. The little pup trembled violently, every breath forming a fragile cloud of mist in the freezing air. But then, hope. Just ahead, a café stood like an oasis in the cold. Golden light spilled from the windows, illuminating the snowy sidewalk. Inside, people laughed, their voices muffled by the thick glass. The scent of fresh bread and steaming coffee filled the air, a sharp contrast to the desolate world outside. The café was warmth, safety, life. But could it be for the pup as well? Summoning its last bit of strength, the puppy hobbled toward the café door. With a desperate whimper, it placed a trembling paw against the glass, its tiny claws leaving faint streaks. Its breath fogged up the surface as it pressed its nose closer, peering inside with wide, pleading eyes. The warmth was so close, just a thin barrier of glass separated it from salvation. Its tail, stiff with cold, barely wagged as it let out a weak yelp. The soft, pitiful sound was almost lost in the storm, but inside, someone had noticed. Inside the café, the atmosphere was lively. Couples chatted over steaming cups of cocoa, a family laughed at a joke, and a man scrolled through his phone, oblivious to the world outside. But then, a woman by the window gasped, nudging her companion. "Look," she whispered, pointing toward the door. "A puppy." Heads turned. A few murmured in concern, others exchanged glances. Yet no one moved. Some shook their heads, some looked away. "It's just a stray," someone muttered. "They carry diseases," another added. "The owner will shoo it away." Excuses piled up, each one another nail in the puppy's coffin. It remained outside, shivering, rejected, its last hope slipping away like the snowflakes melting on the glass. Among the hesitant crowd, one person didn't look away. A man in his mid-30s, dressed in a worn coat, sat near the entrance, watching the pup with an unreadable expression. His hands tightened around his cup of coffee, the warmth barely reaching past his fingertips. Memories stirred, memories of another dog another time, a companion lost too soon, a bond severed by fate. He knew that pain, the ache of abandonment, and now before him was another soul on the brink of despair. He exhaled deeply, setting his cup down. The others hesitated, but he couldn't. Not this time. As he stood, the café fell silent for a moment. He could feel the weight of curious gazes, the silent judgment, but he ignored it. Step by step, he approached the door. The puppy, sensing movement, perked its ears slightly, though its body still trembled. Hope flickered in its weary eyes. His hand hovered over the handle. Doubt crept in. What if the owner threw them both out? What if the puppy was sick? Or worse? But then another gust of wind howled outside, rattling the glass. The pup whimpered, shrinking against the cold. There was no more time to hesitate. With a deep breath, he pulled the door open, and for the first time that night, warmth touched the frozen pup. The stranger's fingers tightened around the ceramic coffee cup, its warmth barely reaching through the chill that had settled deep within them. Outside, the snow continued its relentless descent, blanketing the world in an unforgiving white. The German Shepherd puppy still sat near the glass door, its tiny frame trembling violently. A lump formed in the stranger's throat. They had seen stray dogs before, lonely, forgotten souls left to survive or perish. But this one, there was something different, something desperate in those eyes. Should they intervene? What if the cafe had rules against animals? What if the puppy was sick, dangerous, or worse, belonged to someone who had abandoned it for a reason? Each moment of hesitation felt like a betrayal. The snow thickened, the pup's movements slowed. A decision had to be made, and it had to be made now. The stranger stood abruptly, chair scraping against the wooden floor. As they moved toward the door, voices murmured around them. A middle-aged man frowned. "You're not seriously thinking of letting that mutt in, are you?" Waitress glanced at the puppy and shook her head. "We can't allow animals inside, it's against policy." Another customer, an older woman, sighed sympathetically, but remained seated. "It's a stray, it probably has fleas, diseases. Poor thing, but there's nothing we can do." The stranger hesitated. The resistance wasn't surprising. Some people viewed stray animals as nothing more than a nuisance. But what about the others? They saw the suffering, yet fear kept them from acting. "Someone has to help," the stranger murmured, glancing back at the tiny, shivering pup. The puppy's small body wobbled as it tried to stand, only to collapse into the snow. A soft whimper, so faint it was barely audible through the glass, escaped its mouth. Its fur was coated in frost now, its breath slow and labored. The stranger clenched their jaw. Every second wasted brought the pup closer to death. The cafe's warmth, the chatter, the scent of fresh pastries, all of it contrasted cruelly, with the life fading away just outside the door. No more waiting. As the stranger reached for the door handle, a memory surfaced, one buried deep, but never truly forgotten. A dog, much like this one, had once looked up at them with the same pleading eyes. Years ago, a childhood pet had fallen ill. Their family, unable to afford treatment, had made the heartbreaking choice to leave it behind at a shelter. They had walked away, listening to its cries, convincing themselves it was for the best. They never forgave themselves. Not again. Not this time. The cold hit like a slap the moment the door opened. The wind howled, whipping through the stranger's coat. As they stepped into the storm, the cafe's warmth disappeared behind them, replaced by biting air and stinging snowflakes. The puppy barely lifted its head, too weak to react. The stranger knelt, reaching out a cautious hand. The pup flinched. Instinct told it to run, but its body betrayed it, too exhausted to flee. Its dark eyes flickered between fear and hope. "Hey, little one," the stranger whispered, voice soft despite the wind. "I'm not going to hurt you." They slowly removed their scarf and extended it, offering warmth without force. The puppy hesitated, then, as if surrendering to fate, it leaned into the fabric, its small body trembling even as it soaked in the warmth. Relief flooded the stranger. They had gained the pup's trust. Just as the stranger wrapped the puppy gently in their scarf and prepared to carry it inside, a sharp voice cut through the air. "Stop!" The cafe owner stood at the doorway, arms crossed, eyes hard. "You can't bring that dog in here." The stranger's heart pounded. "It'll die if I leave it out here," the owner sighed. "I get that, but I have rules. Customers will complain, health inspectors. A choice had to be made. Obey the rules or break them for the sake of this one fragile life." The stranger held the puppy closer, feeling its faint heartbeat against their chest. The cafe, the customers, the rules, all of it faded against the weight of this moment. With a deep breath, they squared their shoulders and met the owner's gaze. "Then I'll take it somewhere else," they declared. "But I won't let it die." Silence stretched between them. The owner studied the stranger, then glanced at the half-conscious pup. Something softened in his expression. "Fine," he muttered. "But keep it wrapped up and away from the food." The stranger barely heard the words before pushing past him, stepping back into the warmth of the cafe, the puppy tucked securely in their arms. The battle wasn't over, but for now, the little pup had a chance. The wind howled outside, swirling snow into the dimly lit street. The tiny German Shepherd puppy lay motionless, its fragile body trembling violently. Its breathing was shallow, its eyes flickering as if fighting to stay open. A weak whimper escaped its frozen lips, barely audible over the roaring storm. Inside the café, the rescuer's pulse pounded. Every passing second felt like a nail in a coffin. Their fingers twitched against the glass, hesitating for only a moment before they rushed forward. The door swung open, a gust of icy air slicing into the warmth of the café. Their boots crunched through the deepening snow as they reached the puppy, kneeling down and scooping the trembling creature into their arms. The cold seeped through their coat, but they tightened their grip, feeling the frail heartbeat beneath the frozen fur. "If I don't act now, it might not make it," they whispered, their breath fogging in the frigid air. With a deep breath, they turned back toward the café, bracing for what was to come. The café door slammed shut behind them, cutting off the wind's relentless howl. A stunned silence fell over the room as customers and staff turned toward the rescuer. The puppy shuddered against their chest, tiny paws curling inward, seeking any scrap of warmth. "What do you think you're doing?" a staff member demanded, eyes wide with disbelief. "It's freezing to death," the rescuer shot back, voice firm but pleading. "I couldn't just leave it out there." Murmurs spread through the café. Some nodded in understanding, their gazes softening while others shifted uncomfortably. "But it's against policy," another employee interjected. "We can't have animals inside." "Rules shouldn't matter when a life is at stake," someone else countered, a woman by the window who had been watching the puppy earlier. The rescuer's heart pounded as they held the frail bundle closer. They had broken the rules, but for the right reason. Now they could only hope the café would show the same compassion. The café's warmth enveloped the puppy, melting the frost clinging to its fur. The rescuer knelt by a heater, gently rubbing the pup's tiny paws, urging warmth back into its stiff limbs. The puppy's shivers slowly lessened, though its breaths remained shallow. A barista hesitated before stepping forward, holding out a soft towel. "Here," she said quietly, "wrap it in this." Gratefully, the rescuer took it, swaddling the pup in the thick fabric. Another customer, a man in a heavy coat, walked over with a small dish of warm milk. "It's not much, but maybe it'll help." The rescuer dipped a finger into the milk, touching it to the puppy's lips. For a moment, there was no response. Then, weakly, the pup's tiny tongue flicked out, lapping at the warmth. A flicker of hope ignited in the rescuer's chest. Minutes passed, stretching into what felt like hours. The once lifeless puppy curled tighter in the towel, its breathing growing steadier. Then slowly it lifted its head, eyes barely open but filled with something new, a flicker of life. The rescuer exhaled, unaware they had been holding their breath. Their fingers trembled as they stroked the pup's damp fur. "You're okay," they whispered. "You're safe now." Around them, the tension in the café dissolved. People who had initially protested now watched with quiet awe. Some even smiled, their expressions softened. The waitress who had been against the idea at first finally spoke. "I guess sometimes rules need to be broken." The rescuer swallowed the lump in their throat, glancing down at the tiny creature in their arms. Had they saved the puppy, or had the puppy saved them? Outside, the storm raged on, but inside something had changed. A single act of kindness had melted the coldest of hearts, proving that sometimes compassion was the only rule that truly mattered. The café had quieted after the initial uproar. The tiny German Shepherd puppy lay curled in the rescuer's arms, wrapped in a soft towel someone had offered. Its frail body had stopped trembling as the warmth seeped into its bones. The rescuer, a man in his mid-30s named Daniel, looked down at the pup's exhausted face. He could feel the slight rise and fall of its breath against his chest. Daniel's mind raced. He had never considered having a pet before. His job kept him busy, and his small apartment wasn't exactly the best place for a dog. But as he gazed into the puppy's sleepy brown eyes, something inside him shifted. This wasn't just an animal in need. It was a soul seeking safety, just like he had once been. Could he really walk away now? The cafe owner, a stern-looking woman in her 50s, approached with folded arms. "So, what's your plan?" she asked, her voice softer than before.